George Washington left behind a nation, but no direct bloodline. No sons, no grandsons, no Y-chromosome passed forward from America's first president. For more than 2 centuries, this created a fascinating scientific dilemma. How do you trace the ancestry of one of the most studied men in history when you cannot test his DNA? Because despite popular belief, despite headlines, despite internet rumors, George Washington's DNA has never been extracted from his remains. And yet, scientists still reconstructed his paternal lineage, still identified his genetic heritage, still followed a biological trail stretching back thousands of years. How? That's where the story gets extremely interesting. Before we unravel this historical and genetic puzzle, subscribe to the channel now. If you're fascinated by ancestry mysteries, DNA revelations, and the hidden layers of American history, this channel is built for you. Let's begin. George Washington's life is one of the most documented biographies ever written. Military commander, founding father, first president of the United States. But his personal life carried a quieter mystery, one historians have debated for generations. He never fathered a biological child. After marrying Martha Custis in 1759, Washington became a stepfather to her children from her previous marriage. He raised them, guided them, cared for them. But the couple had no children together. Why? We don't know with certainty. Some historians speculate that a severe illness in Washington's youth, possibly smallpox, may have contributed to infertility. Others suggest medical conditions impossible to diagnose retroactively. There are no surviving medical records that conclusively explain it. What remains undisputed is the consequence. When George Washington died at Mount Vernon in 1799, his direct paternal line ended with him. And from a genetic standpoint, that matters enormously. To understand why, we need a quick genetics primer. The Y chromosome is passed almost unchanged from father to son. It acts like a biological surname, a genetic thread connecting generations of men across centuries, but only if the male line continues. No sons means no transmission. No transmission means no direct Y DNA sample from descendants, which is why Washington's ancestry presents a unique challenge. Unlike many historical figures, there is no living male line descendant carrying George Washington's Y chromosome, at least not directly from him. But here's the twist. Washington had brothers, and brothers share the same paternal Y chromosome inherited from their father, which opens a fascinating workaround. If you're enjoying this deep dive into history and DNA, hit the like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps this content reach more curious minds. Washington's father, Augustine Washington, had several sons, including Samuel Washington, John, Augustine Washington, Charles Washington. Each inherited the Washington Y chromosome. Each potentially passed it forward, meaning that while George Washington had no sons, his paternal genetic signature did not necessarily vanish. It may have survived through the male line descendants of his brothers. And that is exactly where modern genetic genealogy enters the story. Contrary to popular myths, scientists did not, and have not, exhumed George Washington's body for DNA testing. Mount Vernon has consistently maintained a policy against destructive sampling of Washington's remains, which means no bone extraction, no tooth sampling, no direct genomic sequencing. Instead, researchers turn to something equally powerful: living relatives connected through documented genealogy. Washington family surname DNA projects, particularly those involving male line descendants of collateral branches, allowed geneticists to analyze Y DNA carried by men who descend from Washington family males. These studies focus on men with well-documented Washington lineage, verified paper trails, shared paternal ancestry. By comparing Y chromosome markers among these individuals, scientists could infer the likely Y DNA signature of the Washington paternal line. Not speculative guesswork, but statistical and genealogical reconstruction. And what did those studies suggest? The Washington paternal lineage appears to belong to haplogroup R1b, specifically the subclade R1b U152. Now, this is where many popular videos go wildly off the rails. So let's stay precise. R1b is one of the most common Y-chromosome haplogroups in Western Europe. It is strongly associated with populations in Britain, Ireland, France, Iberia, parts of Central Europe. U152 is a sub-branch frequently linked to Alpine regions, northern Italy, Switzerland, eastern France. It is not rare, it is not exotic, it is not mysterious, but it does tell a deep-time story. Haplogroups are not ethnicities. They are ancient lineages tracing prehistoric migrations. R1b-U152 likely emerged thousands of years ago during Bronze Age population movements across Europe, long before nations, long before surnames, long before anything recognizable as modern identity, meaning Washington's paternal ancestry connects him, biologically, to ancient European populations shaped by waves of migration, settlement, and cultural transformation. Here's where the intrigue becomes controversial, but safe. Because many viewers expect something shocking, a secret ancestry twist, a hidden heritage bombshell. But the real surprise is subtler and far more revealing. Washington's ancestry is exactly what historical records always suggested: predominantly British, predominantly English. Descended from English gentry families who arrived in colonial Virginia, DNA did not rewrite Washington's identity. It reinforced the documentary trail, and that in itself is fascinating, because in an era obsessed with dramatic ancestry reversals, sometimes science confirms rather than disrupts. If this kind of myth-busting history intrigues you, subscribe now. This channel explores where legend, memory, and genetics collide. Let's address another common misconception. You can't know anything about Washington's DNA without testing his remains. False. Genetic genealogy routinely reconstructs lineages using relatives. This is standard practice in historical investigations, forensic identification. Ancient DNA studies testing collateral descendants can reveal haplogroups shared mutations, lineage continuity, without disturbing iconic graves. Now let's talk about Lincoln, because comparisons often surface. Abraham Lincoln's Y-DNA has also been studied via documented male line descendants. Lincoln too belongs to haplogroup R1b, which leads to sensationalist framing like two presidents sharing a rare lineage. But here's the grounded reality. R1b is extremely common in Europe. Shared haplogroups do not imply close kinship. They reflect deep prehistoric ancestry, thousands of years distant. Still interesting, but not mystical coincidence. Where things genuinely get interesting is not the haplogroup itself, but what this entire story reveals about ancestry expectations. Modern audiences often crave disruption. They want DNA to expose secrets, scandals, hidden truths. But DNA is not a drama generator. It is a data tool. Sometimes it surprises, sometimes it complicates, and sometimes it simply confirms. Washington's case is powerful precisely because it resists sensationalism. No forbidden exhumations, no shocking ancestry reversal, no conspiracy, just careful science working within ethical and historical limits. And yet myths persist. Clickbait headlines claiming, Washington's DNA finally tested. Scientists uncover shocking heritage. But these claims blur reconstruction with direct sequencing, inference with extraction, probability with proof, which raises a deeper question. Why are we so eager for ancestry shockwaves? Because identity is emotional, because heritage feels personal, because discovering unexpected lineage can feel like uncovering hidden chapters of selfhood. DNA testing companies understand this psychology well. Discover who you really are. But ancestry is rarely a single revelation. It's layered, nuanced, interpreted. Washington's story reminds us, historical identity and genetic ancestry often align. But the drama we expect is something we project. If you've ever taken a DNA test that surprised you, comment below. What did you discover? Unexpected regions? Unexpected lineages? Unexpected truths? Now let's address a particularly dangerous territory: false claims of revolutionary discoveries. Some transcripts and videos invent dramatic breakthroughs involving ancient Washington bones, secret DNA extraction, new journals, explosive findings without credible sourcing. This erodes trust, especially with history and genealogy audiences, because these viewers fact-check aggressively. The authentic Washington DNA story is compelling enough: science navigating absence, reconstructing lineage without direct access, working through relatives, records, and statistical genetics. And perhaps the biggest irony: even without testing George Washington's DNA, we understand his ancestry better than most Americans understand their own. Because Washington's genealogy is extraordinarily well documented, while millions of modern family trees still rely on fragmentary memory, which leads to something provocative. We live in an era where ordinary people can test their DNA, but legendary figures remain genetically untouched, protected, unexamined, reconstructed indirectly. Not because science cannot extract DNA, but because ethics, preservation, and cultural respect matter. Washington's grave is not a laboratory, and that boundary is intentional. So what did DNA really reveal about George Washington? Not scandal, not shock, but confirmation that beneath mythology, the Washington lineage reflects the broader story of colonial America: British roots, European ancestry, documented migration, and perhaps an even deeper truth: DNA doesn't just rewrite history, it often stabilizes it. If you enjoy ancestry mysteries approached with accuracy rather than hype, hit like. It helps this channel compete against sensational misinformation. Because the real intrigue isn't what shocking secret did DNA uncover, it's how did scientists solve a genetic puzzle without the man's DNA? That is the mystery. That is the brilliance. That is the story worth telling. George Washington's genetic legacy was never lost. It was waiting, quietly, in the chromosomes of relatives, in the logic of inheritance, in the mathematics of lineage. And in that sense, Washington's ancestry mirrors America itself, a story told not by one individual, but by interconnected branches of family, history, and time. Subscribe for more deep dives into Founding Father Ancestry, DNA Myths versus Reality, Genealogy Mysteries, Hidden American Origins because history isn't static, and ancestry is never as simple as the legends suggest. Until next time, keep digging, because the past is still speaking, through bloodlines.